Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second meeting of the Recovery and Resilience Task Force. I want to start saying thank you for your commitment and thank you for being present. This is a new reality, temporary reality. We are not sure yet. Really it's very nice to have with all of you in person. My name is Oscar Mejias. I am co-chairman of the group, and we are here with Giancoma. So thank you very much. I want to welcome Mayor Velosa. Thank you for being here in this meeting. I think that we could start doing the roll call.
Co-chair Angela Bannerman Ancona.
Here.
Co-chair Oscar Mejia.
Here.
Mayor Alorta.
Here.
Councilwoman LaFortune. Here. Councilor Kerwin is absent. Kristen Adamo. Here. Peter Aiken.
Here.
Shannon Harrell.
Here.
Sabrina Chowdhury. Absent. Shanavi Chai. Is absent. Julian Drick.
Here.
Jim Karam is absent. Jayshel Shank is absent. Larry Warner is absent. You have...
There was non-voting process, sorry.
So noted. So you have 8 present and 6 absent. You do have quorum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so as part of the agenda, we will have 2 specific topics and with some exercises. But we would like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Actually, the minutes are not on the agenda. They're not prepared yet. They take a little bit of time for us to compile. So
Okay, so
they're
there's
not on
no...
our agenda.
Okay. So then let's start with the second topic, community engagement approach. Want to introduce
Sure. So for item number 2 on the agenda, we're going to do a community engagement approaches. We're going to have the co-chairs, facilitate change, walk us through the proposed approaches to engaging the community. And so at this point, I'd like to introduce Andrea Gomes and Kunal Basu. Vasadev, who are they are from Facilitate Change. So I'll open the floor for them and they can take it from here.
Beautiful. Thank y'all so much. As was said, my name is Andrea Gomez. I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Kunal Vasadev. I use they, them pronouns.
And we're here from Facilitate Change, LLC. Our mission is to dismantle systems of privilege and oppression through community organizing and dialogue-based education. For that reason, we are super excited for the opportunity to be here and really help you all center equity and justice as you make these decisions that could have such a great impact on the residents of Providence. So such a pleasure to be here and very excited to get things going. We are only one of 5 community partners on this contract. We are the ones that have the least contact with the community. So we definitely want to call in our other partners. We have DARE, ARISE, the Latino Policy Institute, as well as the NAACP. So they are the ones that are going to really be on the ground, getting you all the voices that you were asking for last week at the last task force meeting. So we're really excited to help kind of be a bridge through these communications, if you will. So you'll notice on the agenda, this topic that we're on today, it was allotted 25 minutes. We anticipate it's going to take a little bit less so that we can leave room for more discussion for agenda item number 3. So with that being said, I want to bring us back to the community partner meeting that we got a chance to facilitate on Tuesday, so y'all can kind of get a sense of what the community partners are thinking and doing. We were really hoping to start drafting some potential community engagement approaches for this work. However, what came up in the conversation is that it's very difficult for us to put a plan together without knowing what kind of commitment the task force members are willing to make in terms of the type of engagement. Because based on the conversation that we witnessed on Friday, there's a lot of desire to get community voices. And from the community partner side, there's a little bit of potential distrust and wondering of like, is this just a repetition? So how can we make sure that folks really feel the trust? This is really an opportunity for us to rebuild trust between the city of Providence and Providence residents. Before we get into dialogue, I had already skipped ahead. One of the things that we like to do is really center ourselves in a set of acknowledgments or an understanding some assumptions about the world we live in. So I've asked the co-chairs if we could have just a couple of minutes to do that. So I invite you all to take a deep breath in with me and out. One more time, in and out. We'd like to take just a minute to acknowledge the land that we're on, the water, the air that gives us life, that allows us to continue to do this work. While we're acknowledging that land, making sure that we acknowledge the indigenous communities who were traditional stewards of this land, specifically where we're standing, the Narragansett, Wampanoag, and Nipmuc peoples, amongst others, acknowledging that there are others with connection to this land, acknowledging the genocide that occurred once colonizers came, and the fact that we're still living in that history and the impact in that history. So while we acknowledge that we're standing on stolen land, we also want to acknowledge that it is a land that was built up by stolen people, our brothers and sisters of the African diaspora who were kidnapped, trafficked, and enslaved, and we still live in the history of a foundational anti-Blackness in the culture that we exist in. And so for us, it's really important that we can all just sit with that for a minute. So we can take another deep breath in together and out. It's important for us to recognize these histories because we know we're dealing with disparities in the way COVID is impacting all of us, and a lot of those disparities are rooted in that history. So thank you all so much for engaging in our practice, and with that, we do want to get started with the conversation and the dialogue. So, as I was saying before, we got a chance to meet with the community partners on Tuesday, and one of the things that came up was this desire to know what it is that task force members would commit to, because the desire that came up from most community partners is wanting to be face-to-face with task force members, and obviously this kind of Friday noon meeting makes that very difficult. So if community partners are going to be able to schedule community conversations, we want to know whether or not task force members are excited and willing to be at those conversations. Would folks prefer to get information a different way? Again, based on the conversation that you yourselves had on Friday, really just starting to get a sense of what it is that folks want to do. Now, as you can see, that's going to connect to agenda item number 3. We do have some more structured activities to get thoughts going, but we wanted to just pause and get a sense of what people's reactions were hearing that, knowing that we're not willing as community partners to commit to an engagement strategy until we have a better sense from you all what it is that we can commit to, how it is that we can work together. So I'll yield the floor and allow folks a little bit of discussion, share what questions, comments, or concerns come up for you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here and for getting started with this. Would I know get permission to chair? Sorry, so, chair. So you have to come with me.
Sorry. Councilman LaFortune?
Am I acknowledged?
Yes.
Thank you. So what are so right now, after your first initial conversation with community members, and I'm glad that community members do want to make sure that they're engaging with the task force so that we can directly hear what the needs are. But can you share a bit what are like some of the top things that they have voiced as areas where they would like to see funding invested in, and why it matters to
Thank you. That's a great question, and one I really wish we had the answer to. And I think that was one of the things that came up for us, is that in order to really be able to capture the voices, people live such intersectional lives that it's so hard to know, like, exactly what anyone is doing. We've also recognized that there's been a lot of participatory research done by other organizations, so we really want to create opportunities for that to be brought forward. So I know Chair Angie had mentioned that Julian had also submitted some information. So we're trying to create opportunities for like best practices to line up with community voice. I think community partners, there's a level of frustration that because they've been doing this work for so long and have been asked that question so many times, it's almost like, okay, but what's going to happen with it? Like, so there's a little bit of really hesitation that I frankly understand in wanting to share something because they want to feel the investment that like what they're saying is not just going to be like, okay, we were heard and now the money's going wherever the money was intending to go anyway. I know it doesn't answer the question, but I hope it provides a little insight. Cool. The chair will recognize Peter.
I'd like to recognize Peter.
I just wanted to state that I do think it's partly you're explicitly kind of asking the idea, should this group have entertained the opportunity to have some kind of evening meeting or meeting to make it easier for that public input. I do think, on a limited basis, that could be a good thing, and even considering the opportunity of opening and public input during a daytime meeting because some people may be easier to do that. And I do think we need to talk about other ways to get into, of course, even through those groups, but maybe also direct to the group, submitting comments or whatever, because some people may not be able to come or feel comfortable speaking at a meeting. But I do think the one other thing that I would maybe say if there was a public meeting, and not as a cop-out, but just to be clear with those community folks, is that this group is in the position of making recommendations to the elected officials who will actually make the final decision. So even though there's a representative for those elected officials here, this group at the end of the day is not going to be able to have the power to say this is how the money will be spent. So as long as people understand that, I think as a member of it, I would commit to saying that input would be taken very seriously by me, and that I would want to have the recommendations really reflect the community voice. But it's just to say that it's not an automatic thing that this body then gets to actually spend the money.
Absolutely. Thank you for recognizing that. I think it's important for all of us to know exactly where we fall in this process, right? And I think that's one of the reasons community partners feel so strongly in this way, to protect their members. And so that transparency is part of what they're taking back to their members. For that reason, I think it's fair for everyone to know exactly what's happening when and how how much power folks really have in their input. Our chair, you recognize the mayor.
I'd like to recognize the mayor.
So can you just help me understand it, like, what are we talking about in terms of opportunities for community input? Like, how many sessions are there going to be? Is it community input into these meetings, or are there separate meetings, and how many, and how are they going to be held?
Love this question, because that's actually what's going to put us into agenda item number 3. So if there's no other concerns or things that folks would like to raise, I would like us to start spending the majority of our time kind of answering those questions, because we didn't want to tell y'all, because we could easily tell you we're going to have this number of meetings of this time of day, and if y'all can't commit or can't show up, it doesn't work. So being able to know what you all can commit to, so we can bring that back to our people and can craft the events around that. So with that, I will hold the mayor's question, open up the room in case there's any other questions, comments, or concerns, and if not, we can move on to agenda item number 3. All right, so on the chair's
So we'll move forward to agenda item number 3, define the task force goals that will also be facilitated by Facilitate Change.
Well, I have done a ridiculous amount of talking so far, so I'm going to turn it over to my partner.
Again, my name is Kunal Dasway. I use they, them pronouns. So excited to be here with y'all and doing this work. I haven't been in City Hall in 2 years, so this is like a flashback for me. I really wanted to create a space for y'all to do some individual reflection first, and then also start to share a little bit with your colleagues around the table, and then hopefully end with some small group discussion, and then sharing out. And we really want to come back to that question that Andrea is bringing up from our community partners of what is the commitment folks are willing to make in terms of community engagement from this task force. And so, please help me with wording because I'm losing my words a little bit. But what I would love for you to do for the first 2 minutes is just individually reflect what does that commitment look like for you, what are you willing to commit to, knowing not just your position here on this task force, but your position in other aspects of your lives, whether it's your job, whether it's your family life, whatever those identities may be. So what commitment individually are you able to commit over the course of this next year that this task force will be meeting? Once we have those 2 minutes for individual reflection, we'll move on and have you all just share with a person next to you for about, I would say, 5 or 6 minutes, just to kind of share what came up for you in those initial individual reflections around what your commitment might look like, what is your partner's commitment, and really practicing also this aspect of listening and holding space for what your partner is sharing and really kind of understanding their identities, their frames, what are they bringing into it. And then after those pair shares, we'll kind of split the group, split the task force up so that different tables can connect with one another in a smaller group and kind of really start then thinking as a collective, what do those commitments look like? How can we meet those commitments as a collective, knowing where we are individually and what commitments we as individuals can make? What does that look like as a group? And then finally, we'll end with some whole group discussion to really start this conversation as a whole group and continue this discussion forward. This will be really helpful for us to facilitate change as systems change strategies over here too, to bring back to the community partners, because we do meet every Tuesday, and this will be our way to be like, this is what's coming up with the task force when we're talking about what are they able to commit to, so that we can continue thinking about this conversation. And I think the thing that's coming up for me right now, just as a little piece of framing, is like the negotiation aspect and the relationship building process. What are people willing to give and take in a relationship and be able to invest in one another, and seeing that as an ongoing conversation as we go. Before we dive into the individual reflections, I would love to just know if there's anything that comes up for folks, any questions or clarifications.
So just a quick question. So the agenda says define the task force's goals. Can you create the link? So you want us to focus on our commitment to this committee and connect the dots to defining the task force's goals?
So we're starting with the individual task force members' commitments because of what came up in the last conversation on Friday and the desire to center community engagement. So in order for y'all to create goals for yourself, knowing how you can be engaged, the process part of things, that's where we tend to focus, will allow us to get to that conversation. So that's also why we use this tool called 1-2-4-all. Because we have limited time, it allows multiple conversations to occur at once. So we can do share backs at the end that allow conversation to move forward a little faster. Yes, so in order to get to the goal.
So just to understand, so the task force goals around community engagement or task force goals in general?
My understanding was more around community engagement specifically, especially given the purpose and principles, the guiding principles that we shared last week, because we know that a lot of it is already written out for y'all in terms of how to operate from that document. And like a lot of the things that we brought up in terms of like representation and centering equity, meeting from experts is all already in there. So just to save some time focusing on the areas that still need.
Thank you.
I do want to bring it back to Peter's comment just a little bit ago, because it can be easy in this process to focus on the collective and say things like, all right, we as the task force could X, Y, Z. To bring it back to what Camille saying, during your reflection, really think about yourself and your own commitments, your own abilities. Kyle, I know you're representing Larry, so, the best that you can to think about what kind of commitment Larry could present. That way we know as a collective if there are certain task force members that are willing to do evening sessions, if there are certain task force members that want to do community conversations one-on-one, or be more involved in surveys, or as creative as you can get. Because the thing that excited me about Friday is that this particular task force has members that have connection to Providence and have the same kinds or similar relationships that we as community partners have. So making sure we're leveraging all of the relationships to get as much community voice represented. So if no other questions, we can start the timer for personal reflection. We'd ask the folks on the Zoom call who are also serving to just reflect on their own, like what kind of commitments they would like the task force to have, knowing that there are no task force members. So just for the folks here serving, thinking about what we wish the task force would commit to, as that can also contribute to the conversation. So your 2-minute timer starts now. halfway through our time.
All right. So 2 minutes are up for individual reflection. What we're going to move into now is just the character that we mentioned before. So just for ease of access, and then I'll just have anybody move around, we'll just have everybody connect with the person right next to them, so that y'all can spend the next up to 5 minutes on the timer, just connecting and sharing what came up for you personally, thinking about what commitments you're able to make. So this, I think Peter and Kyle, Kristen and Julian, Oscar and,
So you will be both of you?
I'm joining y'all.
Okay.
I'll join you.
Okay.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you all? I'm here, that's bullying too.
Reading on behalf of the mayor.
Okay.
Will commit to being present, to actively listening,
Ready to listen?
providing community support
I gotta put on my
Listen, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
I need to enjoy my time and not just as co-chair of the member of the community, to do my best in order to value the work that we are doing as a team, to create suggestions and to create proposals that just think. It's my focus to present suggestions that could have positive impact not just in me, but in the long term. And this is a lifetime opportunity to change, positive change. Meeting just to generate another beautiful report. Committed with the success and to have
People get asked the same questions over and over again, and that is my intention to not engage in that process.
Obviously not speaking for the mayor, but speaking for myself, but
There's a lot we can draw upon, what's been done, how it's been done,
and, there are new ideas, certainly
I think for me, it was really important for us to know what and recognize
and we need to be
methods of engaging people traditionally may not necessarily.
putting aside differences.
Making sure that we're clearly engaging people, and so,
One time,
schedule-wise.
come together with the difference.
I always think about, folks who are my neighbors.
Something for
Because they,
it's not outcomes, right? It's what
so, another thing that came to me was making sure that what we're doing now is going to impact
I understand perfectly
so they're really thoughtful and
said about, what Peter said.
that what we're doing.
We are not making decisions, we're just presenting suggestions.
As I've often said,
Maybe in this task force,
once in a lifetime.
to make that happen. Not just pretend the results.
So the recommendations that we're making.
It is my job. See what you can do. The commitment to continue the work. Gary, I did my job.
The other thing from my vantage point is I thought
Getting it over the council service process for Friday. Even from BCP.
and I want to make sure that the corporate community has a voice as well.
Getting the results.
Having worked
So even that, right, I mean, right, what you're saying brings up, there's still the whole.
My particular industry, and so I want that to be with that part of the conversation.
Still the
That's really the job.
how
And the going to that,
working into it. Yeah, you're right. There's a whole.
I never been in public. Function. I always been in private. I think there's every project, suggestion, whatever thing that I used to do, need to go on the action plan. Maybe that's for concept. We should an action plan. And we want to see results, and we would like to suggest in place or the best way how to reach the goals that we are looking for. Hard work will accept it. I will in that direction. Not just beautiful things, beautiful reading. Need to have an action plan.
What, do you have your own business? Oh, you do? Oh, great. Yeah, right. Always action plan.
Yeah. All the time. You can just we can't wait for things to happen. I've been in business I've been in education, technology, now I'm in construction, so I know a little bit about it.
All right, our time is ended. We would love for the conversations to continue, and we want to make sure we're using your time effectively, so we want to kind of start getting to some set of commitments, if you will. So I'll have Kamal share the next part.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is combine the different duos, and then of course this trio with the duo at the end over there. And for this small group discussion, what we really want the two small groups to do is start nailing down some commitments. It can be your top 2 or top 3 things as a collective you think y'all would be able to commit to, but just coming to some sort of consensus around those commitments as a small group. I would ask, since each chair will be in one of the groups, if you all either are willing to take notes or can designate somebody in your group to take notes, just to kind of scribe those down. It'll help make our chair back easier as a whole group, and hopefully also help the clerk to be able to capture the different notes and things that come out. And then there's an additional piece to that we would love to have you consider.
Absolutely. So while you're thinking about the 2 or 3 commitments that your small group is willing to make, we'd also love a section of just notes if anything topical comes up. So if there's any interest areas around you think should be prioritized and looking at for funding, we want to make sure we're bringing that back to community partners as well so that they can sit with it. So again, on one side, you're going to be doing those 2 to 3 commitments and any notes around topics that you think should be explored through this process. Does anybody have any questions? We're going to give you 10 minutes in those small groups, and then we're just going to get to share out and hopefully come to some commitment after that. So again, this side of the room and that side of the room. Okay. You might want to
No.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
getting into your thing.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're messed up, so you're good.
I'm kind of a heavy breather, so. Yeah.
There you go.
So, I'll take notes. Would love to hear more about what y'all talked about in your group and see whether or not we can boil down to some commitment.
Running everything in every state,
every Saturday.
We talked a little bit about that, well, when you say, yes, I'm open to everything, and then something like that comes up, like, oh my God, I have T-ball, and Little League, stuff that, is real stuff to use, but still being present in the community. Well, with that in mind, I committed to being present. You know, one thing that I know about Larry is that he is available when he's there, he's giving you the attention and he's engaged. And secondly, is to bring his whole self, and that includes all the roles that he plays, as a father, as a husband, as a grantmaker, as a health expert, as a former firefighter, as a professional, everything that he is to bring to the table and to weigh in. And then on the other side, that he'll be a thoughtful, he'll engage thoughtfully. Will be a thought partner around the table, and of course, he'll meet the community members where they are. So to that point, if it's 10 a.m. or 7 p.m., I know that he is communicated himself, and he appears to be in places that want to really meet them where they are, and not only idealize them, but if they need someone to be present one-on-one, have a close watch competitive, he's willing to do that. And then the last piece really is to be willing to partner and negotiate to a productive end. So I'm thinking about the goals that are set, whether it's the capital or the community at large, and also the parameters that is meaningful, and so that it's not simply good policy, but it's good policy that impacts people's lives productively.
Thank you.
I feel like a lot. I feel like every day we do all that stuff, yeah. We can do it. He would want to do it, yeah. I think, so I just said, some of those things I hadn't thought about, but made me think about, okay, that I should bring my, knowledge and experience, or more that I'm doing now with other things, and other organizations and efforts in the city that I've been involved in. And, like I said, probably try to, I want to try to, be part of some, meetings here for different people. And then, well, I'm not really, representing per se the residents of housing. I do my job working with leaders and resident associations. So I was thinking about, input from them that I've already received in the past, but also which things that I can do during the course of the time to bring residents. Either to keep them informed and say if there are opportunities to come directly give input, but also one thing to hold at a meeting that specifically focus on this with them, and then take that and be able to have that in fun way to say, I'm just going to make that here.
So I think let's talk about how I'm a very specific person. I'm very happy to go outside of my to really listen and consider it a learning opportunity. It is a part of, I consider this a job, that's part of my job, so really listen and learn. As we talked about being available on all hours and also the accessibility, we talk a lot about, I said languages, but it's also disabilities and all of that. One thing I wanted to point out is I don't want to lose sight in Karen said it really eloquently in asking you about how all of the work that's being done here is also affecting the corporate culture, and there are specific segments that really hurt rather than segmented by industry and geography, and I don't want to lose sight of their opportunity to weigh in as well, because they're all necessarily interesting. I'm in tourism, and we have housekeepers for years. So, we all kind of fit together and wanted to say that.
I was just going to say something like that. I went to a conference, and I was thinking about that because there's no housekeeping until you move out, until you leave. One towel, the bring towels and stuff. And I think that from a health standpoint, that you wouldn't have people come in the room, but then I was thinking,
we're about halfway through time, 5 minutes left.
They must have fewer housekeepers on staff.
That's really what happens. And a lot of times, I was the first job that people have in the call and often the company,
I have to repeat something that I said earlier. Beyond that, I think the commitment to be present and informed, and also to engage with a wider range of people as possible in community organizations, centering on those marginalized and people surrounding in Providence in direct connection ways. And very much, just a reminder that there's no one person or organization or and then also talk about kind of just the commitment to be conflict exists already. There's dynamics, whether we're talking about between organizations, between communities, between institutions and employers and employees, and do not shy away from that and understand conflict as a separate
I think first of all, to be present.
talk a lot about accessibility where they are
And also,
I think a couple of things that were mentioned earlier were already mentioned. So only thing I'll add to that is, decisions that we make today are going to impact not necessarily us, but the future. And so really, one of the things I wanted to make sure we are thoughtful and strategic about engaging youth, because most of this will be impacting the next generation. So, and they're often left out of the table. So, and that's the only thing, fully present and meeting, making sure we're meeting people where they are, linguistically, schedule-wise. I had some similar things.
I'm so glad you said it about the young people, because that's my pet peeve with every meeting I go to. It's like, there's nobody at the age of 40, So I'm really glad that you said that.
So I saw some common themes as I was listening in terms of, being fully present. I think a couple other people said meeting people where they are, meeting the community where they are, and let's see, being comfortable with conflict. That was a really important one as well. There is going to be conflict, right? Acknowledging it and understanding it. That was a important one. If there's anything that rises to the top that I haven't mentioned, engaging a wider audience.
I do think it's, in some sort of recommendations or first things that has to happen in the first 60 days, that then, there has to be, figure out where to take something in terms of that community input in that first period of meeting, even if there's stuff that happens later as well. So it's the first part is focused on getting short-term needs and then.
One thing I kind of remembered also was around not wasting people's time. Your time is a precious thing.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of things that happen in the community engagement box where you kind of meet the same people and ask them the same questions they were going to ask before. And I think everyone on all sides of it feels a bit like a waste of time, so not doing that and making sure that, if there are things that are already in place before you can ask questions, before you priorities put out there, we start with that. And if not, I've already engaged or other questions, but.
There is thought of including some sort of written component, because some people are very uncomfortable standing up and speaking. And I think it's really important, and that might be another way to get around any sort of language barriers, to have some sort of almost like a forum in electronically, or even like a Dropbox or something, just so other people who are shy can speak. All right, that's our time. Yeah. We very much appreciate the conversations that folks have engaged in, and are very much looking forward to hearing back from each group. So we'd ask each of the chairs to either be the one to share back, or ask someone from your group to share back what are some of the commitments that y'all are willing to come to, as well as what are the notes that came up, if there were any particular issues that you wanted named. I would ask if you could please speak loudly, because our note taker is in Zoom. So
making sure that the folks in the Zoom that are participating can hear us as well, because we've gotten text saying it's a little hard. And I know I'm loud, so if folks could try to be loud as well, I would greatly appreciate it. I want to bring up one other note. I forgot to mention another partner in this. Kristen, I could hear you mention something about language barriers, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, because we do also have Be More Interpreting as part of our team, because we also want to make sure that that's not an issue. So we want to keep in mind that we have access to interpreters as we think about the work that we're doing. So just a random side note, I'm glad I caught that briefly. That's the only thing I caught, so I'm really excited to hear folks cheer out. I'm so sorry. I just took over. So either Angie or Oscar, either of your groups.
Okay, I would like to invite our Councilwoman Nieva.
So, thank you, co-chair. So what we, throughout the conversation, and what we found was that each of us play a role in the work that we do, in connecting with the community. We're all conscious, right, within the community, because we are connected to different groups, different organizations. So part of our role in this committee is being able to get information to those groups. We also talked about accessibility and people not having the knowledge and not knowing the resources that exist. So ensuring that people know how to communicate their needs. But also understanding cultural norms, because even within different groups, there might be hesitation when it comes to communicating with things because of these cultural norms, because they, for them it might be impolite, right? So acknowledging those as we're engaging with the community, as, we all are engaging with the community, as we're thinking about how to collect information and data, as we're thinking about how we're engaging, I think what we, the top priority is making sure that information is there, it is accessible, it is culturally competent, right? In terms of the knowledge, but also the mechanisms in connecting with this group, and more importantly, creating that space for people to feel comfortable in engaging, and finally, not recreating the wheel, because we talked about how there's report after report. We've been talking about the needs for quite some time. So the recommendations that we made as a group should be recommendations that are sustainable, and that also can continue on long after all of this.
And can I expect that the focus on relational versus transactional, I think, will go a long way to easing some of the distrust, because if you show up with information, not just a full information, it just feels more relational. So I really appreciate y'all working that out. Thank you. Was there anything else from this particular group that wanted to get brought up or named?
I just want to add, connected what the Peter said regarding that we are a platform who cannot make decisions, but I feel personally that we could, with the proposal and the application, to present an action plan. We don't want to have another beautiful report that nothing happens and everything ends up someone. So we should keep the commitment to continue trying to press or to put some pressure to make the thing happen. Otherwise, we will be doing the same that we the 20 years, last year, have been doing. Nothing. So it's part of the commitment that we should have as a team.
Beautiful. So moving away from just recommendations to really thinking about a full action plan and how this can turn into a sustainable project and not just this one-time thing. Thank you. Okay, so focus on making sure we're engaging authentically and relationally, focus on an action plan instead of recommendations. Were there any other commitments that came up from this group?
When you recognize.
So I think another thing that we all are coming into this with our own positions in certain organizations. So my position, I feel the other two, is to remain impartial and objective and not bring our own self-interest to this and look out for what the whole community needs. And also related to that, and it's kind of said, really listen to the feedback. Don't go into the assumptions because you know what people need, but really listen to that community.
Beautiful. Thank you. Really centering feedback. Beautiful. Thank you for the time. You were in the room here. Seemed like to present some of the potential commitments or thoughts that came up.
Sure, and I will talk about some of the themes that came up when we chatted, and if the folks on our team, if I missed anything, feel free to add them. One of the commitments that was a common theme was to be fully present as part of the process and bring our whole selves to this process as well too. Another thing that came up is meeting people where they are and being thoughtful into the end. And one of the things that came up that was particularly important was being comfortable with conflict, where it exists, and acknowledging it and being comfortable with it. And I think it kind of goes along with the theme that came up here is not wasting people's time. And I think Councilwoman LaFortune talked a little bit about there is existing information and data, rather than replicating, making sure that we're starting from a knowledge base that already exists. And let's see, one thing that came up, I didn't share with the group, but that came up while I was sitting here, was a commitment to be honest and transparent. I think it's really important. I think something you mentioned, Andrea, earlier about, multiple opportunities where there is a level of distrust between government and the community. Just being honest and transparent with the community throughout the process, I think is critically important as well, too. Did I miss anything?
Talking about accessibility, we did say specifically also in terms of with languages, kind of multiple languages, not just Spanish, but being reflective of the many languages in Providence, and then also in terms of disability, thinking about people who are deaf and hard of hearing in particular, and other areas, making sure that it's accessible in those ways.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much also for focusing on commitment in terms of how you show up, not just like time. Because it's really, really easy to be like, yep, I can do 1 night a week or 2 nights, whatever, versus really thinking about how to show up. And if we are rebuilding trust, that's where we want to center and start. With that being said, I want to make sure that I'm also bringing something back to the community partners to kind of get us going in our work. So are folks wanting to and willing to engage in outside of Friday afternoon? We can do more conversation with community partners to present something more concrete given the things that you also shared, and the desire to be transparent and be culturally appropriate and meet people where they're at. So I think that's something that we can build off. I do think that pulling in system change strategies will be helpful given the desire to not reinvent the wheel, as Councilwoman Fortune said. Really compiling some of the reports and studies that have already been done, and kind of just providing y'all with some synopsis. That way you're not reading every single report, because we have time for that. If we're going to be transparent, making sure we're only committing to the things that can happen. So this is very helpful for me in what we're bringing back to the community partners. I also want to open it up for any, I wanted some feedback around how this process went for folks, and then opening for questions, if anybody has questions of us or system change strategies around the work that we're going to be doing.
I just want to add a comment regarding the question that the mayor made about, we are talking about goals of the community engagement, or we are talking about goals in general. I think we need to do both. So the first time, in the first step, we need to have the commitment with the community that they will be part of this process, and we are really working for them. We are not doing because we have particular interest. So we need to create those goals to show that commitment with the community, that engagement in both sense. And also, I suppose that should be done for the next session, then start to work in the general goals, create buckets, identify the needs, and start to work a little bit more in the technical part.
Absolutely. Thank you.
One other thing I just talked about a little bit, but last week we kind of set out a couple sets of a short-term focus on a couple of very urgent needs, specifically around housing and violence, really, and then longer term. And so I would say, for one thing, that the community engagement, there has to be some piece of that happens within that first 60 days where there is a short term, but I also think not to limit or prescribe what people talk about, but I think if we're going to have a meeting, to kind of guide it a little bit to say this is where what the group is looking at, these are the areas we're looking at, and say if we do a first meeting and we say we're specifically looking in the short term on these issues related to housing and violence in the community, community, someone can stand up and talk about something totally different if they want, but at least for them to know it's part of the transparency, that here's what we're working on, and if you can give us comments related to that, it will really best inform what we're working on right now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely bring back to the community partners a bit of focus on that and a recognition of the immediate need around that so that we can get some perspective from there. For sure.
And I think, you know, something Angie said that there's already a lot of work being done to focus on that. And at Genesis Center, you know, we have access to a big part of the community. We're already doing focus groups for the development of another program. So I think we can take the data we get from that and, you know, bring it up to this. And we also have a financial activity center. You know, the past year, we tracked all the supports we've given and all the concerns. So I think we can look at that data with trends and also present.
Just under sharing some data that will help influence needs for understanding of needs.
And we actually touched upon project story.
Any final thoughts or questions for us or change strategy?
I just have a question if there are, in addition to kind of the traditional like public forum or ways of engaging people physically, plans for other ways of getting feedback or input that you all would be leading, whether it's kind of surveys or kind of face-to-face or kind of on bus routes or, you know, at corner stores, whatever it might be, that wouldn't necessarily be the type of setting that task force members would be at, but that you'd be kind of gathering information and then bringing it back to us and summarizing it as part of the process.
Yeah.
I can make that question. This is Michael from Resiliency Strategy, and yes, all the things you just mentioned, I think we want to be keeping in mind as we develop the plan over the next week. So surveys definitely in person and further focus groups maybe, and how we want to target those. So I think out there we can definitely bring back and try to come up with a strategy that's both attainable given our time boundaries, as well as give people proper context. Thank you.
Well, we're very excited to be working with y'all. We'll be happy to support however possible. We'll really be centering the community engagement side and y'all are really big in with the community strategy for the rest of the work. So thank y'all. I turn it back over to the chairs.
Thank you. Just want to let you know that we will be working this week. And GME, we will be working with the consultants in order to reviewing the material that some of you sent it to us to start the process of identifying some needs and be better prepared for the next meeting. So next week, we will be working in that before the next meeting. I think that we could.
Just one quick question, I'm sorry. Aside from potentially, if we do say evening meetings for public input, there have been emails about other possible meeting times, and then I got some calendar invites from Diana that I thought suggested we were sticking with the Friday time, but I just didn't know if you all have determined like a meeting schedule for future weeks or not.
I'm not clear on that. Brett, would you have any additional information on that?
Yeah, we're still collecting feedback on time, but I can report back to you.
Okay. So it looks like we might be meeting in person at 12 o'clock next week, Friday, right? Okay. And then I guess others will determine. Thank you for that question. Any yes?
I just want to add, also, especially with members meeting with outside groups and everything, let's steer clear of a quorum issue, so no more than 7 members meeting together, because once you hit the 8, you have quorum. So I just want to look out for everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, that can kind of logistics we help with. Yeah, appreciate it. So please reach out to me and, also with staffing, if we can try to work on a schedule so I know what staffing that we have available, so that we can help facilitate these meetings, whether they here or in an outside place. We have traveled to outside places before. It gets a little tricky, but I'm sure I would get support from the mayor's office, because we'll have equipment that we're going to need to bring and other items. So I think in collaboration, we can, facilitate meetings And we also have the chamber available for larger meetings if you plan on having public hearings, and that is a very large room that can fit quite a few people, so that is also an alternative as well.
Thank you, Tina. That's appreciated.
Should we,
Yeah,
John?
yeah. I'd like to get a motion to adjourn. No motion to adjourn?
We've had a few departures in the meantime,
Got you.
all the meetings are.
Okay, the meeting is closed.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.